This is video log number 7, and it is about the ways that I think are most effective to collect data. So the 4 methods that we talked about in class last week were focus groups, surveys/interview style, Facebook, and then using photos. And I felt that all 4 of them were good methods, and all of them had their setbacks. So I'll just go through each individually and talk about what I feel like their effectiveness would be. So for the photos, I felt like it was a really neat idea. It was something that is unique and would elicit a unique response. The obvious setbacks would be the camera. We're not really sure what kind of cameras we would hand out, if we would just tell them to use their own cameras, and obviously the variable of not knowing what people are going to take pictures of. But what I thought with that method was using 2 methods for the same thing. So they would come in and we would show them pre-taken pictures, and that way we could ask very guided questions, have a more uniform response, and introduce them to what we're doing with the photos. That way, when we tell them to go out and take their own photos, they have a better idea of what they're looking for, and it'll kind of give a greater uniformity to the data, and hopefully more useful data, and not, just random pictures. But I thought it was a really cool idea. If we could get it worked out a little more clearly, I think it'd be more useful, but it didn't seem like that one had as much of a positive response in our class, so we might not end up using it at all for the research. Facebook was another method, and once again, very cool, unique, new form of research, but I think that the drawbacks we would have with that are getting people to agree to allow us to stalk them on Facebook. Although a lot of people have some public settings, with the thought of having like an employer or someone's parents or a researcher look at their page, I think people would be a little nervous about that. So I think that could be a setback. Also, not everything on the internet is true. Not everything people put on their pages is true. And I'm not sure if Facebook, although it's a really, really awesome research method, would really give us the answers that we need or the data that we need for our research project. So I wasn't as crazy about that one, but if we ended up using it, I think it would be really interesting. The last 2 methods were the ones that we kind of unanimously agreed on for the actual research project. One of them was individual interviews / survey style and focus groups, and I personally, of the 2, prefer individual interviews, just because I feel like with focus groups people are more likely to not voice their own opinions, whether it be because they hear someone else's opinion and they just kind of jump off of that one and say, oh, me too, for this reason, or whether we have a kind of group think mentality where one person says, I believe this very, very strongly, and then more people agree with that, and then there are a couple people in the room that, although they disagree, aren't really strong enough or confident enough to disagree in the group, and then they would, in that case, just say, oh, I agree too. I think that would skew the data and just not be a great experience. I think from the dialogues that we've had so far, I've seen a lot of that where everyone in the room, all 25 people, it's very unlikely that all 25 people in the room have the same opinion. However, only one opinion is being voiced. And it could just be the size of the group. I've never had a small group with 5 or 6 people where that might work better with this interview style, but that one I question a little bit more than individual interviews. So for individual interviews, it might be harder for people to think what we're kind of like figure out what we're asking them and what we're directing them toward, whereas in a focus group, one person might get it and then it's like everybody else gets it. But I do think that in an interview, the responses would be much more individual and would just be stronger in that that person isn't trying to agree with anyone or bounce off of anyone. It's just their own individual thoughts and opinions. So also with interview style, I thought it would be easier to fire off more questions. That way we could cover more. Whereas, although, okay, with individual interviews, we would have to take more time to interview just as many people as the focus group could hold, and it would take more time to do those individual interviews. However, in the individual interview, it would take less time to answer each question, so you could fire off more questions for each person. So I think they might end up balancing out in time usage, but I'm personally leaning more toward the individual interview survey style kind of research method. So of the four, individual interviews would be my favorite. I really liked the photo option, but if that wasn't kind of universally agreed on and that one just ends up getting kicked out, I would be okay. I would be fine collecting data in any sense, but I'm interested to know what everybody else's opinions are. And I'm not sure if we are planning on only using one method of research strictly, or if we are splitting into groups and then one group does this method and another group does another method. But we'll find out in class today, I guess. And I'm pretty excited about getting our research started and planned out. So this is the end of video log number 7.